Hello, everyone. You clicked on the Long Range Public Outlook here at East Coast Weather Association. I am your meteorologist, Mike Griffith, and we're looking at the GEFS, or the Global Ensemble Forecast System. And this is an ensemble average, a bunch of different model runs all together of the GFS, bunch of different runs of the GFS all averaged out so you can get a generalized idea of what's coming down the road in the long range, rather than looking at just one run of the GFS, which is the deterministic model, and that doesn't always tell the picture or the truth. As we can see out here in the western United States, there is another ridge of high pressure building across the four corners out there, and they're going to start to get hot once again, and that's not good news for them because they have been extremely hot out there. I'm sure everybody has seen pictures of the mailboxes melting, the street signs melting, the trash cans melting with the recyclables inside. I mean, 120 degrees, it's sustained. It's just unbearable out there. Even if it is less humid, it's still heat. It's still hot weather. And a lot of the air conditioners out there probably have a lot of trouble keeping up. That's going to be the trend out there. And in the east, it's going to remain stormy. This little kink in the lines right here at 500 millibars, this is in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. This is about 18,000 feet, is going to be indicative of a trough that's going to be moving its way eastward, keeping its structure over the east coast of the United States here. And as long as this ridge holds out here in the western part of the United States, they're going to be extremely hot, especially in the Four Corners, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Idaho, or I should say Utah, not Idaho, and New Mexico out there. So you're gonna see a lot more stories of them baking in the heat out there out west. Continued unsettled and stormy in the east as the jet stream is kind of taking a dip like this, or a trough in the east, just like this. So it's going to continue to be stormy through Friday the 7th. And of course, the stories out there in the west is going to be the heat. This huge dome, or this huge bulge in the height lines in the atmosphere, is going to be where the wind follows. The wind blows parallel to these black lines, and it's kind of like a roller coaster here in the east. It goes up and then it comes down, it speeds up and then goes out to the Atlantic. And this is where all the cooler air and the storminess and the low pressure comes from in the east. So we're looking into the 8th here, which is this Saturday, this weekend. Much, much cooler and more pleasant weather here across the east part of the United States for July. It might even feel like late August here across parts of the east, because it's going to be less humid and it's going to be sunny after the rain moves through and after the fronts move through. Unfortunately, when you have this type of pattern, you're going to be dealing with a lot of cold fronts moving through the east, which is going to touch off severe thunderstorms, including tornadoes and hail and high winds and wind damage and all that. So we're looking now into the weekend, into the 9th. Cool and very pleasant here across the east. Maybe even up in northern New England, it's going to feel like fall or autumn. And the temperatures up there are going to have trouble hitting 80 degrees in this type of pattern here through the 9th, which is this weekend. And then that pattern persists all the way through the 10th. Still hot out there in the west. Sustained heat out there. You're going to see a lot of this in the news headlines out here as things possibly might be melting once again, although I'm not sure if it's going to be as extreme as before, but they cannot escape the heat, and we cannot escape the rain and the chilly air here in the east. Again, through the 10th, through the 11th, the pattern starts to lift a little bit, so it might be a little bit of a warm-up here, but nothing more than seasonable. Of course, this doesn't include Florida because they're going to be in a tropical environment, and they're going to not really be affected by all of this too much, except for the instability with the showers and the late-day thunderstorms, especially along the coastal areas, including Fort Lauderdale and Miami, even down to the Keys, and also Tampa and St. Petersburg here in the western part of Florida, but still remaining in the trough pattern here into the east coast, and it's looking like the ridge might shift a little bit to the central part of the country. Not totally unheard of for this time of year for the ridge of high pressure to shift over the Dust Bowl in the central part of the plains, and they're going to get to be dry out there, so maybe not quite good news for them because of the farmers and the crops, maybe not getting enough rain to help them out there. So that ridge, it's not a real strong ridge. It's not real crazy according to the ensembles. They don't have this thing blowing up into a huge heat wave out there. But what this is just going to be is just going to turn dry across much of the central part of the United States, including the Dakotas and down into Nebraska and Kansas. So not really going to be a whole lot going on there as far as active weather, but they're going to be hot and dry there in the eastern part of the United States. So a little bit of that heat could carry into the east, but it's still looking like very seasonable through the 12th of July. Not looking like a really big heat wave out here. Could be getting some thunderstorms moving down into the Carolinas and the mountains of eastern Tennessee and West Virginia, western Virginia, as this is a pattern that is kind of favorable for thunderstorms to ride down these lines of pressure contours here. And maybe some of these thunderstorm complex could be like a convective complex, like one of those, I want to say derechos, but maybe not quite that extreme. But we could see some activity move down into the mid-Atlantic here from Wednesday the 12th, which is next week. So much of the central part of the country is shaping up under a big ridge of high pressure, very, very common for July, but it's going to be very, very hot. But the heat's going to be concentrated here across the central part of the country. We're probably going to see maybe some mid-90s, maybe even some upper 90s here across Nebraska and Iowa and even the Dakotas and in the Kansas. So looking across the central part of the United States is where the heat is going to be concentrated. We're going to be relieved from the heat here, although there's going to be frequent cold fronts that are going to bring us a lot of showers and thunderstorms here in the east and some severe weather. If some of that could be broken off from this high pressure ridge and heading into the east here through the 12th, 13th, 14th or so of this month. Still baking here in the west, and they're going to be keeping the heat out there. It's not going to get any farther than the Midwest, and the ridge kind of wants to shift back over to the west once again, which is going to open up the door for cooler air here in the eastern part of the United States. And that ridge out there continues to just bake the west, including the Four Corners. Here's a closed 594 contour, which is going to be super hot across Idaho, maybe Salt Lake City there. Even in the mountains and the upper elevations, they're still going to be really hot there. So this is looking like a beautiful normal July pattern here across the United States. But then again, it's still going to be a trough in the east, a dip in the jet stream, and a lot cooler through the 15th, 16th of July. And that ridge is going to continue to just hold out there in the west all the way through the 17th of July out there and continue to trough into the East Coast here. So if you don't like the heat, you're not going to have much to worry about this July here in the East, because it is not going to be hot. It is going to be rather seasonable and even chilly up here in the northern New England. Here is where all the cold air is sitting in Canada. On Greenland and the Northwest Territories and Baffin Bay up in northern Canada, the northern Hudson Bay is where all the air is, the cold air is. It's not going to be escaping down here, but if this cold air stays locked up here in this part of the North Pole throughout the early fall, the game could be on for early winter, for early outbreaks here across the East Coast for cold air. And you know what that means. Once the cold air is in place, it sets the ground for some pretty good East Coast snowstorms. So looking out here in the west, in the Four Corners, still the same, I should say, ridge of high pressure is going to stay out there, and it's going to continue to bake. Although it weakens a little bit, it's not going to be quite as strong through the 18th. Ensembles have this thing breaking down a little bit here, but it's still a pretty decent ridge of high pressure here in the west. And opposite of that in the east is going to be seasonable. Nothing really to write home about through the 18th or so of this month. That still holds out there on the 18th into the 19th out there. And looks like it's a decent ridge, but it's not a 594 ridge. It's a 591 ridge. And I can explain this later, what this number means. It's just the strength of the ridge out here. Kind of like a low pressure system has millibars. You can think of those numbers as a way to describe how strong an upper level system is. Okay, so we're looking at 591 here across the west. They're going to bake through the 19th through the 20th. We're still going to be a little bit cool and unsettled here in the east. So cooler than usual, stormy, rainy is what we're expecting, with some severe weather outbreaks here in the east, especially anything that can come over the top of this ridge and into the mid-Atlantic. And that's going to be the pattern from now all the way through the middle to the 20th of this month. Cooler than usual, but some of the storms that escape from the top of this ridge and scoot over the top of this ridge could move into the eastern part of the United States and cause some severe weather. The 591 ridge out there in the Four Corners persists through the 20th, 21st of this month. And that is just crazy for them because they're going to start having drought problems out there. They're going to have heat issues, lots of air conditioners breaking down, some possible automobile trouble with the radiators overheating, radiators, however you say it, depending on what part of the country you're from. I'm a Yankee, so I say radiator. So now I'm confused because people down here tell me I say it wrong. So I'm just going to say it both ways here. So there we go. Through the end of the month, the 21st anyway, 10 days before the end of this month, we're looking at the ridge out there holding into the Four Corners and the desert southwest, and it's just going to be a nasty situation for them. Very bone dry and hot out there with a raging sun. Very bright sunshine, rivers and creeks and streams out there in Arizona running dry. They're not going to be running with water, that's for sure. They're going to be drying up, and there's going to be a lot of dust out here as well. We're going to have to watch for some dust storms. We're going to have to watch out if any of the wind can kick up, although it's not common for wind to be in areas of such strong high pressure. We're going to have to watch this area for some blowing dust out here in the Four Corners for some time this month, maybe early August or late July or mid-July. And here comes a trough here across the southeast part of the United States, and it's just looking like a blissful escape from the heat this year in the southeastern part of the United States. Let's take a look here at the jet stream and why is it going to be so chilly in New England, and why is it going to be below average temperatures here in the eastern part of the United States. Well, let's take it back into the 4th of July. This is where a lot of the storms came from the lightning pictures with the fireworks. It's because there was a pretty strong jet stream which was causing a lot of unsettled weather in the blue here and also down here across Florida. This was the 4th of July. But moving ahead into the future here, the jet stream is just going to stay active here across the North Pacific and across the Pacific Northwest. There's a Gulf of Alaska low there, which causes the jet stream to still be active. And normally for July, the jet stream gets really weak and it doesn't really remain active. So this is why we've been getting so much rain here in the east and it's been so much cooler, because there's been a conveyor belt of moisture transport into the eastern part of the United States. And I was actually seeing this back in May and saying it's going to be a cool and wet summer. And actually, it has been. It wasn't too difficult to see. I mean, a lot of people out there forecasting it probably could have said the same thing. They haven't really, I'm not special for saying this. I bet you there's some other meteorologists out there that would have agreed with me on this. But look at this nice little dip in the jet stream. Some pretty good upper airflow here across the east into this weekend, which is the 8th of July. This is going to cause some turbulence. If you're flying anywhere up into Quebec or Ottawa or anywhere up into Canada from the East Coast, from New York City out west, you're going to get some turbulence here. If you're flying into O'Hare this weekend, you're going to get some turbulence out there too. Basically, if you're flying from Boston out to Los Angeles or anywhere, Seattle, you're going to be getting some turbulence out there, some pretty decent rough air. Especially this coming weekend, the 8th into the 9th. And that trough just continues all the way into the end of this weekend. If you're flying from New York to over to Europe, you're going to have a nice little tailwind, and you're going to maybe knock an extra half an hour to maybe even a whole hour off your flight. That is just very, very strong jet stream for this time of year for mid-July. That's crazy. You're going to have some turbulence heading into Canada if you're flying overseas from New York into Europe. And if you're trying to actually come against the current here, you're going to have a nice little headwind and some turbulence if you're flying from Europe back into New York City around the 9th or 10th of this month. Still remaining a trough here in the east. Cooler than usual is what we're seeing. The jet stream takes a dip into the 10th of this month or so. And the upper air patterns remain very active. And here comes the upper air. The jet stream goes over top of that ridge that we were looking at earlier. And the Pacific jet over Hawaii this time of year, it's just crazy to see a portion of the jet stream this far south over Hawaii. This is because El Nino is actually weakening. It's not going to be an El Nino into this coming rest of this summer and then into the fall, into the winter. So if it was an El Nino, we wouldn't see a portion of the jet stream or a branch of it go this far south over Hawaii. We would only see the northern part, and it'll be very weak. So this is going to be interesting leading up into the wintertime and even the fall. But anyway, the rest of this month, looking like an active jet stream here and a dip of it coming into the east coast here, remaining active, remaining stormy. Bunch of cold fronts, a bunch of different cool air outbreaks, a series of cold air outbreaks, severe weather, as the upper airflow and the jet stream remains very active into the 20th and the 21st of this month. That's all I have for you right now. I'm meteorologist Mike Griffith. If you want to go to our website, you can sign up for our about maybe once a week newsletter whenever things change more often. More frequent when things are changing, but we offer a newsletter right now that goes into detail and provides personal updates. And also on Facebook, there's a group for members only. So if you are a member, a premium member, after you signed up, we use PayPal. So it's a trusted, secure way to pay. It's only $5.50 a month. That's all we ask, just so we can stay operational and make it worth our time to continue to throw out these forecasts and to give them to you. So thanks a lot for watching this segment of East Coast Weather Association. This is your long-range outlook, valid until the end of July. And I am meteorologist Mike Griffith. Have a great time, everybody, and I wish you well.